It was kind of a bittersweet moment. Um, that was the last time a Mullins boy will be singing for Christmas. Oh, I know. Thad's growing up. That's why we had to get two more to start over. All right. And they're a lot cuter. They are. They are. Oh, no one cried. I cannot believe that. I like the record. We've been talking about this moving Christmas. It's kind of an odd title. It's like a moving Christmas. Well, the reason I've called it that, because the last 2 weeks we have looked at how God was moving hundreds of years before Jesus' birth. How he was moving through circumstances and people to bring about what he said would happen. And last week, we looked at Micah chapter 5 and Isaiah chapter 7. We looked at two Old Testament passages that are described as prophecies. And we talked about how Old Testament prophecies would have, when they were heard and said, would have an immediate answer. That means, as it was said, the prophet or the ones listening to it would see that statement come true in their lifetime. But then we talked about how the New Testament authors take that and apply it as an even greater answer. And that comes about in the birth of Jesus. And then some Old Testament prophecies have an even greater answer when Jesus comes back. Last week, Micah chapter 5. Micah states on behalf of God that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. God told everyone 740 years before it happened exactly where the child would be born. And then in Isaiah chapter 7, we have God speaking through the prophet Isaiah, telling everyone that it would be a miracle birth, that a virgin would become pregnant and give birth to a child. And so as we're looking at this moving Christmas, as we're looking at how God moved hundreds of years before it happened, we're going to look at another passage, another prophecy that took place 740 years before Jesus' birth. It's once again found in the book of Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 9. But today's main point, at the end of the day, what I hope that you'll walk away with, what I hope you'll think, okay, is that the promised Messiah, Jesus, would be a mighty and peaceful ruler to bring light to the whole world. And what that means to you, what that means to us, is that we need to let Christ rule our hearts to be our counsel, our peace, our strength during the times of darkness for now and evermore. Isaiah chapter 9. Nevertheless, now, let me give the context, because if you start with there, so where's that connecting to? It goes back to the couple of chapters right before this, where God spoke through the prophet Isaiah, telling the people of Israel, you haven't listened to the warnings I've given you time and time again. You have continued to worship other gods. You have continued to be worshipers of idols. And because of that, I'm going to remove my protection and my blessing. And you're going to be invaded. You're going to be taken over. And it's going to be awful. But nevertheless, even though, all because of that, once you realize I'm God, you're going to turn back to me. And there will be no more gloom for those in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by way of the sea beyond the Jordan. Israel had different tribes, and when they first entered the land, each tribe was given a location. And Zebulun and Naphtali's part of the land is the northern part. What that means is they were the first ones to be invaded. They are the first ones to feel the effect of the Assyrians coming down. They will also be the first ones to feel the effects of God saving them. But this is a prophecy in itself. You see, Matthew, who was one of Jesus' disciples, when he writes his account of Jesus' life and ministry, he looks back at that prophecy. And right after, he talks about how Jesus set an example for us by being immersed in the Jordan River by his cousin. And then Jesus, 40 days of fasting and prayer, and how Satan came after him to derail him, to try to get him to cave and not carry out the mission God had sent him for. After that, Matthew writes these words. Leaving Nazareth, so where Jesus was living, he, Jesus, went and lived in Capernaum, which was by the lake in the area of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was said through the prophet Isaiah. And then he quotes the same thing we just read. Jesus began his ministry. When Jesus began to preach and teach, he started in the northern part of Israel, the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. That is where he performed his first miracle, turning water into wine, of all things. It started. The hope of the world started where God said it would 770 years before. You see, Jesus is our hope. He's our hope. If you have a relationship with Jesus, no matter how dark things get, no matter how bad things get, you have hope that there is something better. You have hope that this is not all there is. You have hope. You have hope as a loved one struggles to breathe, struggles to keep going. You have hope that your earthly goodbye isn't all that there is. And it all started, as the prophet Isaiah said, in northern Israel. Isaiah continues to speak on God's behalf. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Jesus described himself as, I am the light of the world. Yeah, he's the light. Isaiah was prophesying that they have seen a great light. He's talking about all of those who see. Here's the amazing thing about light. Light always wins over darkness. Always. No matter if it's a small light, it can still penetrate the darkest of darks. If there's such a thing as darkest of darks. Light always wins. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at harvest, as warriors rejoice from dividing the plunder. The immediate answer, remember, every prophecy has what? An immediate answer and then a greater answer. The immediate answer is after Israel comes back, as they turn back to God, they're going to have such great joy, like a farmer bringing in a great crop, all the hard work, or how after a battle, the one who has won, the joy of victory. It's what they're going to feel like. It's what God's going to bring about. As in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressors. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for the burning, will be fuel for the fire. No more fighting. You're going to have peace. You're going to not need the boots that you used for battle. You're not going to need the cloak you used. You don't even need it anymore, so much so that you know you're not going to be able to get it clean. You can just burn it, get rid of it. That's the type of peace that's going to happen. Israel was being told that once you turn back to God, you're going to receive a blessing. The fulfillment, of course, ultimately is in Jesus. Jesus is a blessing. And within this passage, we have at least, I see 3 blessings that Jesus brings about. Well, the first is this idea that he is going to expand the nation. Well, in the New Testament, the understanding of Israel, the understanding anytime I talked about the nation, was that it was about not physical Israel, but spiritual Israel, meaning the church. Because of Jesus' birth, death, and resurrection, this thing called the church was started. This church is the family of God. It is an amazing thing to be part of. And I'm not just talking about the little group that meets here. I'm talking about part of the church as the whole, the ones across the street, down the road, throughout the nation, across the world. That is the church. We get so focused sometimes just thinking of us in small little sections, but we're all part of it. When God's people does something great, we should be proud of that because we're part of it. When I look at the post from Liberty House and I see different churches coming aside and doing different things, it's fun to watch how it's the church supporting that amazing place. And it's this church and that church. I'm proud of it. I hit likes on it. Actually, I just want to brag, Catalina. I'm like the fan of the week last week for Liberty House. Just point that out. Thank you very much. Never been a fan of anything, but I guess that. But when a church wins, we all win. It's not a competition. I mean, my family was blessed this past week. Providence. Not only did they do birthday parties for the foster kids through NECO, but they also put on the Christmas program. And with that, they make sure that every child that NECO has in the foster program has Christmas presents. Right now, under the Mullins tree is all the girls' presents because we didn't buy them. The poor girls are going to have a culture shock when their last name is Mullins. They're not spoiled like that. I mean, Shay's got this huge old box, and all the kids see it. And you're like, really? You know? But that's a win because we're part of the church. We're in this together. Jesus is a blessing. He is what brings us all together. And that is phenomenal. That's an amazing thing to be part of. And if you haven't plugged in to a local church, then you're missing out on not being part of something that is amazing. I can't imagine life without our church family. I just can't imagine that. And not just because I'm the pastor. When we were out of ministry for a while, we felt lost because we didn't have that connection we had had for 13 years. And almost immediately we moved in to Missouri, and one of the first things we did is find a church. And we went to this really huge church, but we were invited to join a small group. And that year of healing that we needed as a family, that I needed as a recovering pastor, took place because of the church. If you're not part, you're missing out. Jesus is also a blessing that because of his birth, death, and resurrection, he opened the doors to heaven. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me. There is no way to the perfect afterlife, a place where there's no pain, no suffering. This place that Isaiah was referring to when he was talking about the greater fulfillment of this joy and celebration, this peace, without a personal relationship with Jesus. You can't earn it. You don't deserve it. You can only obtain it by having a relationship. Isaiah goes on. And this is the part of the prophecy that you probably have heard at some point in time during a Christmas season. And it comes from here. These are the words, comes from this passage. So I wanted to kind of give you what came before, what's building up to it. For us a child is born, to us a son is given. The government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. For the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing, upholding with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Isaiah is talking about how Jesus was going to bring about an everlasting kingdom. He's talking about this everlasting peace. He's talking about heaven. That's what he's talking about. You see, Jesus is King of kings. He's Lord of lords. The great apostle Paul, author of most of the New Testament, wrote that one day when Jesus comes back, every knee will bow and every tongue confess that he is Lord. That means at one point in time, every person, no matter rank, no matter status, no matter what other beliefs they have, will bow and say he is Lord. It is better to claim that now and enjoy the blessings and the hope that you have in Jesus than to be shocked the day it happens. And a lot of people are going to be shocked. They're going to be caught off guard, and it's going to be too late. Don't let that be your story, because it's going to happen. Because if God could keep his word about a child being born in a small, insignificant town in Israel, if God could keep his word about a virgin giving birth to a child, if God can keep his word that his preaching and teaching would start, of all places, not where he was originally from, if God could keep his word that his son would die and that he'd be brought back to life, if he can keep his word about that, he can keep his word that he's going to come back. And then Isaiah lists some interesting descriptions of Jesus, what people would call him. And I liked what one pastor wrote about those. He writes, he is called Wonderful Counselor. He will always give you the counsel that is best for your life, and he provides it with no selfish motivation. He is Mighty God. No one or nothing can take him down or defeat him. Who do you want on your side? I want the Mighty God. He is Eternal Father. When he gives you counsel, it is what's best for your eternal well-being, not only the short term, but ultimately for the long term. He is Prince of Peace. No one rules more compassionately, and he rules in such a way the subjects can live in peace. Understand that the Old Testament concept of peace wasn't just about no wars or fighting. It was about wholeness, an environment where all frustrations are gone. Isn't that how heaven is described? A place where there's no pain, no loss, no guilt, but instead, joy, peace, comfort, love. That's what Jesus came to bring. I hope this reminds you from Isaiah chapter 9 that the promised Messiah Jesus would be a mighty and peaceful ruler to bring a light to the whole world. And that's not just for them. That's for us today. We need to let Christ rule our lives, to be our counsel, to be our peace, to be the strength during the darkest times, from now and forevermore. A moving Christmas. God was moving. God was moving so that you and I could be saved. God was moving you to be here today. Maybe he used a bunch of cute little kids to get you here. And I guarantee if you feel something moving in you, it's not because of a little sermon you just heard, but because somebody else has been living the life. Someone else has been talking to you at some point in time about Jesus. You may not have come expecting to change your life, but it can take place today. I believe in a God who provides miracles. He did that at Christmas. The very first time, it was all a miracle. If you don't have that everlasting hope, you need it in your life. It will change everything. I want to end with talking about one other part of what Isaiah said. He talks about the Midianites. He's referring back to a time when Israel was enslaved by the Midianites. And God called a man who was not a warrior to lead his people. And he said, I only want you to take 300 men. And I want you to show up with torches and some clay pots and some horns. And they broke the pots, held up the torches, blew the horns, and the Midianites, thousands of them, ran. And God broke that bondage of slavery. Isaiah said that's what Jesus is going to do. And what he's talking about is there is no sin that has you enslaved right now that he won't break and give you freedom. If you repent it, if you confess it, and you ask him to. And the ultimate break of sin's hold on you is to break its hold on you for death. That's where sin leads, to ultimate death. And you break that, immersed into him. You break that by confessing your belief of who he is. You break that by repenting and admitting your sin, and you break that by living for him. We would love to help you take that step today. Or maybe you just need prayer. We're here to minister to you because we're part of the family of God. And that's what family does. They take care of each other. So we're here. Will you stand?